Alright, I'm Sean Sims,
And I'm Robert Salatin.
and we did intercollegiate athletics. Talking about the history of intercollegiate athletics, it started in 1852, where the first intercollegiate event was a rowing competition between Yale and Harvard. There was a sponsorship to help promote the event, so that's what really kicked off the first event because they wanted to promote this, so they just were able to call it an actual intercollegiate event. In 1859, it was the first intercollegiate baseball game between Williams College and Amherst College. They actually wanted to start a new rule, and you can see by this graph, it talked about it was a square form for baseball. So they basically just wanted to see if these rules would work, so they set up this game specifically for that. Then price-wise, it was very cheap. It was only 25 cents to go to the games in 1872. So all you had to do was bring in a quarter to watch a game, so that was pretty nice. When associations formed in 1876, the first sporting association formed. It would cover football. They thought that the biggest support group would come from football and that they could get the most revenue from football. So they started to, that would be the first sport that they wanted to cover. In 1881, there was finally an athletics committee for Princeton University so they could handle their sports and take care of like their sporting events. And basically they really wanted to do this because they wanted to promote Princeton and the fact that they had sporting events, and that would have kids want to come to that school instead of just coming there for academics. The Big Ten was actually the first big time conference that came around in 1895, which is actually called the Intercollegiate Conference of Faculty Representatives, but it later turned into becoming the Big Ten. For women's intercollegiate athletics, like basically in the beginning of the 1800s, they really wanted to have women more participate than anything. It wasn't really big on competitive levels. They just wanted them to be more active. So in 1889, when the Seven Sister Institution started, it was really for horseback, croquet, and archery, which were sports that not a lot of men played at that time, but they just had the opportunity for women to take control of that. And so it was a good way for them to be active and a good way to promote the sport. In 1917, the first athletic federation of college women was organized. And then 1923, the women's division of National Amateur Athletic Federation came in. So they started promoting for youth women. And they wanted to really do the same thing which we talked about with the first women, just to talk about how they wanted them to be more active and proactive and participating in different sports. A little bit like the history of the intercollegiate athletics. In 1953, the National Section for Girls and Women's Sports of the Association for Health and Physical Education and Recreation. So at this time, they really wanted to make it a big-time deal that in health and physical education, that they really added sports and they had women to be more active and moving around and participating in different events. In 1969, the Commission of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women was established. So this was basically how it started and how real women's sports really began, and that's how it really got competitive at this point. It wasn't about just participation. They actually upgraded the status to a national division for girls and women's sports. So at this point, you had different divisions for depending on what college you were in. And in 1981 to 82, the NCAA actually took over the Women's Athletic Championship. So by this point, they had a big-time program sponsor what their sports were, and it just really started. Early governance and control. Just to talk about a couple of events. In 1905, the Union versus NYU tragedy. It was actually a football game that went on in 1905, and their running back, Harold Moore, actually was running the ball and he got tackled, and they took him off on a stretcher, and then when he got back to the hospital, he died just because of the hit that he took. So they were really shocked by that and really had to think about safety. The IAUS was founded, and that was the Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the U.S. So that's basically what started intercollegiate around the United States. In 1929, the Carnegie Foundation reports came out, and it was actually really interesting because they talked about they were really upset because they thought that nowadays that colleges were promoting and they wanted students to come and they wanted them to participate in sports and they wanted them to come to sporting events, and that's how they made their profit. And this report was pretty critical about that because they thought that the college should be more based off academics and education and what's best for a student, and that they were pulling away from that with having sporting events and having all these different teams. In the 1991 Knight Commission, it was basically a database that talked about every way that they spent money on sporting events, whether they gained money, what they would spend it on, and it was really cool because it put like a lot of perspective in how different sporting events would use so much money and how much money they would be taking in.
As far as the industry format goes, the business aspect of collegiate sports has grown significantly over time and continues to grow as coaches and administrators have become more involved in budgeting, finding revenue sources, controlling expense items, and participating in fund development activities. Out of the three divisions of the NCAA, Division I, Division II, and Division III, the industry format is different for all three of these divisions. And as far as Division I member institutions in general, they support the philosophy of competitiveness, generating revenue through athletics and national success. This philosophy is reflected in the following principles taken from the Division I philosophy statement of the NCAA 2009H. The Division I institutions are usually larger in terms of number of sport programs sponsored, the number of coaches, and also the number of administrators. And also Division I institutions have to sponsor at least 7 sports of all male or mixed gender teams and 7 all-female sports or 6 sports of all male or mixed gender teams and 8 female teams. The Division II institutions usually attract student athletes from local or in-state areas who may receive some athletic scholarships money, but usually not a full ride for Division II. Division II athletic programs must offer at least 10 sports, at least 4 to 5 for men and 5 to 6 for women, and sponsor at least 2 team sports for each gender. Division III institutions do not allow athletic scholarships and encourage participation by maximizing the number of variety of athletic opportunities available to students. Division III, they usually focus on it's not usually like a spectator sport, it's usually on the individual, like the student athlete's performance. That's what they focus on mainly. Kind of literally just went over all of that. The challenging issue, also for the Title IX, gender equity. What is Title IX and who does it apply to? Title IX is a federal law passed in 1972 that prohibits sex discrimination in any educational activity or program receiving federal financial assistance. In 1991, NCAA released result of gender equity study showing that undergraduate enrollment on college campuses was 50% male and 50% female, while the collegiate athletic departments were made up of 70% male and 30% female. So this was kind of just, it wasn't balanced at all, so they needed to make a change of this. To deal with this problem, many institutions eliminated sports programs for men to reduce the participation and funding of the men's side. Another thing they did was other institutions used roster management, which capped the roster size for men's teams and then tried to increase women's participation to try to balance it out. And the third and most appropriate option was to just increase the participation and funding opportunities for females. This also definitely played into how, like this is why in like Division I, how Division I sports, at least like all the institutions for them, they have to sponsor at least 7 sports of all male or mixed gender and 7 teams of all female, or 6 sports of all male or mixed gender with 8 teams of all female, because usually more funding goes towards the men's side just because it's usually the more popular and it's kind of more of a spectator sport than the women's. For the career implications, The common areas in collegiate sports are athletic director, assistant associate athletic director, and coach. As an assistant or associate athletic director, some specialized areas that this job entails are manager, media relations director, ticket sales, fund development coordinator, director of marketing, sport programs administrator, facilities and events coordinator, academic affairs director, or compliance coordinator. My ideal career is to have some kind of marketing position in the NFL, but that may require starting off somewhere, either something like in the high school sports or collegiate sports. I could fit into the marketing side of Division I schools, starting as an associate athletic director by advertising or marketing for a collegiate institution. And that is all we have.